thanks so much for inviting me here. I haven't been to university for quite a long time. I graduated last century actually, and I went to Royal Holloway and I did English literature and classical studies, and I stayed to do a master's in history, and I just loved university. But I'm very aware that I went to university in a pre-9/11 world, and a lot of the students here have grown up in a post-9/11 world. So I'm very aware of that when I go to universities to give a talk on my work. So I just want to give a very brief introduction about myself in a nutshell. The first thing I ever wrote was at university for a student magazine, and it was kind of sad in a way that it was about Islamophobia. It was about the Runnymede Report, who actually coined the phrase, the term Islamophobia. And I eventually got into print media later on. I worked for a Muslim lifestyle magazine called ML magazine. I don't know if anybody ever heard of it, but it was around for about 10 years, and it focused on British Muslim lifestyle, which I'll talk about in my presentation. And then after that, I left the magazine, I went freelance, I started writing for The Guardian, and also my work encompasses broadcast too, so I do a bit of radio and TV. Now I'm going to start the talk by stating the obvious, which is that Islam is big news. Over the past 15 years, there's been a rise in media coverage of Muslims, and of course it's not always positive. So images like these ones are the ones that tend to define the perception of Muslims and Islam for the public, and they tend to link Muslims to rage, oppression, fear, anger, and it kind of feeds this very dangerous notion that Muslims are not part of society. Now there was a Cardiff University study that looked, that looked at Muslims in print media in the UK between 2000 and 2008. And you can imagine the most common nouns that they found were featured in these articles. The ones like, extreme, I mean, you can guess, go for it. What did you say, extremists? Yes, that was one of them. Other words like, sad, isn't it, that we know what the words are. Militant, radical, fanatical, fundamentalist, terrorist, all those kind of words were featured. Only 2% of the news stories that were kind of looked at had involved them having any moral values, which is a real worry. Also, I just wanted to highlight this tabloid headline, and I just wanted to ask you, do you see any problems with that headline? Muslim thugs aged just 12 in knife attack on Brit schoolboy. So I saw a couple of things. First of all, they're calling 12-year-old children thugs, and they are saying that these Muslims are attacking a British schoolboy as if Muslims can't be British. Now the truth of this headline was actually there was some kind of Facebook threat, but they sensationalized this into an actual knife attack, which was incorrect. Now, contrasting to those images that you just saw are images from the magazine that I worked for, ML. I don't know if you recognised any of the people in there. Yeah. There's Michelle Hussein, who is a BBC anchorwoman. Does anyone recognise the guy in the middle?
Yeah, Cat Stevens.
Yeah, Cat Stevens. Formerly known as Cat Stevens. Yeah, Yusuf Islam. And the lady in the top middle, you wouldn't know, but she taught me Kung Fu for about 8 months before I left as a disappointment. But these are the kind of people who, for me, define what Muslims really are. Now, I just need to I forgot about this guy. He was also in the magazine. Now he's actually a badminton star, but looking at him, you wouldn't really think that. He won the Canadian Open in 2004, and he was a silver medalist at the 2006 Commonwealth Games. He's actually brandishing a badminton racket just out of shot. But these aren't the kind of people you often see in the mainstream media. Now, I wanted to look at media and say that it's a reactionary model. You know, in a post-9/11 world, there's been a constant pressure on Muslims to react and to condemn extremist acts. Now, I often get asked about condemnation. You know, people ask me, where is the Muslim condemnation? Well, there's condemnation everywhere. There's even a website called Muslims Condemning Things. I wanted to show you, there was a GIF in here, but I couldn't attach it to the Prezi. But it basically showed you all the different Muslim organisations and Muslims around the world and in the UK who have been condemning Daesh or ISIS, whoever you want to call them, and been condemning terrorism and extremism, but they often don't get highlighted in the media, unfortunately. But I was also going to talk about the issue with condemnation. Now, I'm very, very worried about how Muslims are spoken about in the media, which is often in terms of extremism and terrorism. So either Muslims are terrorists or they are condemning terrorism. And I think that's not a very healthy framework for us to be talked about. There's this book by an American guy called George Lakoff. He's a cognitive linguist, and he studies language and metaphor and the way it frames debate and influences attitudes. Now, in the book, in the introduction, it says, attacking our opponent's frame reinforces their narrative. Our job is to frame our own values, vision and mission and avoid attacking theirs. So I try to abide by this. I think that we need to take a lead and we have to frame our own stories, and we have to talk about what we stand for rather than what we stand against. And so this is what I try to maintain in my work. After I left the magazine ML, I joined Exploring Islam Foundation, and we are a board of, we were young back then, we're not as young as we were, but we're relatively young British Muslims, and we come from a variety of different backgrounds. We are editors, we're graphic designers, we're management consultants, and we were really, really concerned about the public image of Muslims and Islam. So we actually specialise in PR campaigns, and we work on creative resources on Muslims and Islam for mainstream audiences. Now, just before we launched our first campaign, we commissioned a YouGov poll to gauge the public perception of Islam and Muslims, and it found, one of the stats was that it found that 1 in 2 Britons associate Islam with extremism and terrorism. Now, this is going back nearly 6 years. I think that's probably quite a favourable stat now. I think it might get even worse now, because it was about 50% back then. And there were other stats as well, that only 6% associate Islam with justice, and that 69% believe that it encourages the oppression of women. So they were all very, very worrying stats. So what we wanted to do was launch the Inspired by Muhammad campaign. I don't know if anybody heard of that campaign. It was in 2010. And it focused on the universal values that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, championed. And we focused on 3 areas: social justice, women's rights, and protecting the environment. Now, these images were put up around London transport for about 2 weeks. So we had them in key locations on the Underground and at bus shelters, and also on a fleet of London taxis. And the taxis also had slogans of, like, you know, different hadith, and it also directed people to the website, which had more information about the Islamic values of coexistence, education, healthcare, human rights, and it also had the basics of Islamic belief and a biography of the Prophet. Now, this campaign actually got a lot of media coverage. It was quite surprising for us. We actually thought we'd only get 1 article or something. We were hoping for one in The Guardian, but it went all over the place. It was on Sky News, on BBC. It was international as well. It got covered in India, in New Zealand, in France, in Germany, in Canada. So it kind of went off beyond our expectations. But it also showed that people are really hungry for positive stories. I'm just going to quickly show you a clip. I hope it works.
Now, a series of posters challenging our views on Islam are appearing on buses, black cabs and tube stations. The Inspired by Muhammad campaign aims to redefine how Muslims are viewed by Londoners in light of a survey which found that half of us link Islam to terrorism. Around 2/3 of us think Islam encourages the repression of women. Only 13% of people think Islam is a religion of peace, while fewer than 1 in 5 of us feel that the Muslim faith has a positive impact on Britain. Well, our reporter Alice van der Krave has been speaking to some of those involved with the campaign.
Challenging stereotypes, British Muslims gathered today at the British Academy, concerned about the public perception of their religion.
There's a lack of awareness out there, a lack of access to accurate knowledge about Islam and Muslims, and this is why we want to, through the Inspired by Muhammad campaign, provide that access to factual information about what Muslims are contributing to British society. So values that are universal, values of social justice, caring for the environment and women's rights, human rights, animal welfare, all of these things are featured on our website.
Campaigners hope these posters at tube stations, bus stops and on taxis will also go some way towards promoting Islam's ethical beliefs. And London, they say, is the ideal city in which to focus their efforts.
A multicultural society is the society of the future. London is the ideal model for this, and we need to get on. You know, no matter how much people sometimes complain about other cultures and so on being here, well, we cannot turn the clock back. This is the way it is, and it will be increasingly so.
But with more than half the British population associating Islam with extremism, according to today's survey, it seems that PR campaigns like this one still have a lot of educating to do. Alice Banjakravi, BBC London News.
Okay, I hadn't had any sleep before that interview at all because I was so nervous about that campaign the night before. I think I had 2.5 minutes sleep, and then I had back-to-back interviews all day, so it was, I think I was slightly dazed in that interview, but you were going on adrenaline at that point. There was just so many people interested in covering the story, and that was so good for us because we felt like we were actually constructing positive media space. And also it showed, the Inspired by Muhammad campaign showed that we were all doing our bit for society, and we were inspired by our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was a model for coexistence. And that theme of coexistence is what we developed for the next campaign that we did 6 months later, called Missing Pages. The Missing Pages campaign wanted to highlight solidarity between Muslims and Jews. Now, this was quite groundbreaking, I think, because we wanted to move away from the geopolitical tensions that exist between these two faith communities, and we wanted to focus on stories of solidarity that people aren't really aware about. And we also wanted to state that anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in Islam. So we launched this to voice unity also with Holocaust Memorial Day, and this is back in 2011. Now we wanted to highlight how, again, we were inspired by our Quranic ideals and by the prophetic ideals of coexistence. And the people of the book have a very high place in Islam. So this is the 7th century constitution of Medina. So this goes back over 14 centuries, and it actually talked about one community, and it was referring to the Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, and the pagans of Medina, which is a place where the Muslim community had to basically moved to because they were being persecuted in Mecca, in modern-day Saudi Arabia. And I found this really interesting because it's almost like a 7th century model of pluralism. So it talked about Ummatan Wahida, one community, and I think this is completely relevant for today. I'm just going to move on to, so one of the focuses of our campaign was World War II. And we looked at how Muslims had actually saved Jews from the Nazis. And the main focus was on the Albanian Muslims who would hide Jewish families and would never give any of them up, even though they knew that they would be killed if the Nazis were found to be harbouring them. So this book is by an American Jewish photographer called Norman Gershman, and he went over to Albania over a period of about 6 years, and he documented all of these stories and he photographed these people. This lady is one of the Muslim Albanians whose family hid a Jewish family from the Nazis and actually pretended that they were their relatives. So, and she says, you know, why did we hide our Jewish family? Of course we would. We were one family. There are also other. Oh God, sorry. There's a video. I forgot about the video. We also were promoting a video that was based on Norman's journey over there, and it's a really beautiful trailer of a video which I would recommend you to watch because I've seen it many times and I've cried every time. Have a look at this trailer.
Got it.
Albanian wood.
Hello, I'm Roman Gershman. Very pleased to meet you. Your family rescued this Jewish family under the Nazis. You're Muslims, is that correct?
Yeah.
It was this collective agreement amongst the people to save the people.
Vai vetëm të dëshironte që për hebrit të kryente veprimin që i mbeti si kështu pa realizuar.
Ramael העולים שלי עשו את הדבר הזה. זה מנקר לי עד היום.
Must be returned.
Edhe në kulturën tonë, themi kur t'jepet një amanet, që thuhet një detyrim, pesa është edhe te kjo, tek fjala e dhënë.
The journey was almost a year to find this Jewish family.
Kur një njeri jeton gjatë me këtë ide dhe herti u afruan zgjidhje. U afruan drejt zgjidhjes të saj. Është shumë bukur.
So that was the story of the Albanian Muslims, but there were also other stories of people in other countries. For example, in Paris, the rector of the Grand Mosque of Paris actually hid Jews in the underground caverns of the mosque, and he gave them fake Muslim ID. And there was the Algerian sheikhs who would speak out at Friday prayers, at the sermons, and the Vichy regime were in operation in Algeria then, and they would tell everyone, do not collaborate with them, do not collaborate with people who want to oppress our Jewish friends. So, I mean, looking at that image, you don't think that they're calling out for protecting Jews, you know, but this is such a strong image because of the story behind it. And there were also Muslim monarchs who showed solidarity with Jews. And there was a story of the Sarajevo, I never know how to pronounce this, is it Haggadah? And it's Hebrew for telling. Now this is a medieval Jewish manuscript that a Bosnian librarian smuggled out of the Bosnian National Museum, and he wanted to save it from the hands of the Nazis, who just wanted to destroy Jewish heritage as well. So he took it out of Sarajevo and he gave it to an imam who hid it in the floorboards of a mosque, and it was eventually returned after the war to the museum. Now, so we highlighted all of these stories. We also went on a campus tour with Norman Gershman, there he is with the beret, who was the photographer of all of those images. We took him on a university campus tour, and we got Jewish societies and Islamic societies to come together and co-host him. And often it was the first time they'd even met, and it was like a platform for them to actually talk with each other and discuss even like the conflict that's happening, and actually forged friendships too. Now, we got lots of messages of support as well from the then Chief Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sachs, also from, I don't know if you recognise Tim Winter or Abdul Hakim Murad, who's a Muslim scholar, and he's from Cambridge University. Back then, it was we had a message of support from the Labour leader, Ed Miliband, that doesn't look as impressive anymore. So that was another example of positive PR. So just bringing it back a bit more personally, I also do this thing called Pause for Thought on Radio 2, which has involved me so far getting up at literally 4:30 a.m, going into the studio and reading out a script, which it's actually called the God Slot. Pause for Thought is called the God Slot by the BBC, and this is a really good opportunity to talk about faith in a really accessible and organic and positive way. But we can't talk about God too much. They said don't make it too goddy. So I try not to make it. It shouldn't be very preachy. It has to be something that can be quite bridge building. So for me, I love this slot because it just gives me the opportunity to talk about my personal take on faith. More recently, thank God, I'm now going to do Chris Evans' show, which is a much more humane hour of 9 a.m. So before it was 5:45 a.m, and that's a big problem for me. So I am really grateful that I've got what's opened up to me is a variety of media engagement. I've also done a bit of TV, especially last year. Everyone remembers it was only last year that there was the Charlie Hebdo massacre at the beginning of the year. And I think this was in February. And I remember watching Newsnight in January thinking, I'm never ever going to go on Newsnight, it's just too scary. And also you have to be kind of like a representative voice. But then obviously the Charlie Hebdo massacres happened, and I was called up and the woman was like, do you want to come on Newsnight? And I said, no way! And then she was like, please, we need to get more Muslim women on there. And I was like, that is so true, I should be out there, I really am for more Muslim women voices. So I said yes, and in fact, the panel was all female. It was all female Muslims, which I thought was brilliant. And I've also had to wake up to do Sky News, talking sadly about the Paris attacks. And I've been on ITV a few times talking about Prevent, talking about generally like Islamophobia. Sadly, it's always in a negative way, but I try to speak about like solidarity and any message of hope that I have. I mean, it's always very nerve-wracking. I mean, in that final photo, I look like I'm either going to cry or I'm going to throw up. But so it is scary. It is very scary. But I feel that the need outweighs the fear. So this is the only reason I do it. I also write for The Guardian. So I started writing for them in 2010, beginning of 2010. And I quite like to use humour to break down like negative stereotypes. So one of the pieces, sorry it's a bit pixelated, that I have written is about Nadia Hussein winning the Bake Off. I feel that, this whole article was about Britishness being a lot broader than we think. So in the piece I said that Brits like to adopt and absorb different cultures. For example, we've got people like Ben Elton, who are like our national stars. He was the son of a Jewish refugee, and Helen Mirren, she has Russian descent from her grandfather, and Nadia Hussein feel like she's an ambassador for Britain, and I feel like she really united public opinion. People they loved her. I think all over Twitter she was very much a hero. I've also, one of the first pieces I did was about, it's a bit controversial for some, but I did a piece on Muslim women really loving rock music. And so I was trying to break down those stereotypes of women, we're not oppressed, we don't all wear black. And I talked about identity and belonging. I also talk about faith. So I did a piece on interfaith football. It was the Imam versus Clergy Football League. But there was also a rabbi who was the referee in one of their matches, I think. And I wanted to highlight how, a lot of football, a lot of clubs actually had their roots in the church to improve the sense of community. So clubs like Tottenham Hotspurs and Aston Villa actually had roots in the church, and St Mark's Church, for example. Does anybody know what St Mark's Church became known as? Manchester City. Are there any Man City fans? No? Okay, we'll move on. I also wrote a piece on this video called Happy British Muslims. I don't know if anybody have heard of Happy British. Oh, you're nodding. The only one. Well, This was a video that was in light of the Pharrell Williams song. It's a happy song. And there was a global movement. Everybody was making their own versions of the happy video. And this one was British Muslims, which I also featured in. What's that? I don't know, should I show the video? No. I mean, I'll show the video and try and drown out that, whatever that is. Part of the video.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. Hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy, come along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy, come along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Because I'm happy, come along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy, come along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Yeah, well, give me all you got, don't hold it back. Yeah, well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine.
I mean, it goes on for a few minutes, so I'm just going to stop it there. But this, that video got 1 million hits in 3 days, which just showed that people were loving it. Another example of Muslims creating their own positive media story. I think it now stands at over 2 million views. So I felt that that was an expression of, it was a British Muslim cultural expression, because Islam allows for cultural diversity. We've got Moroccan Islam, we've got Indian Islam, we've got Egyptian Islam, we've got Chinese Islam. Why don't we have British Islam? Of course we do. So for me, that happy video reflected the confidence in diversity and in unity, and it was also really good fun to be part of. So just to round up now, just to say that it is a huge challenge to be a person of faith in the media world, but for me, my challenge is to show the positive stories, you know, even within all this negativity. And I feel it's really important for me to frame my own story as much as possible in my own terms. And if the opportunity isn't there, then I need to create them. There's a lot more to say, but I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them.